Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we see every class on Wednesday?
On Wednesday?
For picture day? Or is it
No, that's why picture day is 2 days.
It's Wednesday?
Wednesday and Thursday, picture day.
Gotta get my suit.
Okay. I'm going to back up. This is not in your notes, but it's been a couple of days since we did the last thing we did before the calculator, and that is completing the square. So I just want to run through a completing the square problem with you. You can write this down or not write it down. I don't care. I just want to make sure you remember the steps, because today we're going to go into the quadratic formula, which is another way of solving quadratic equations. On test day, there will be directions that say solve using the quadratic formula and solve using completing the square. In fact, your next quiz will say that. And on your next quiz, I just dropped my lid somewhere. On your next quiz, I'm going to give you the same problem twice. So I'm going to ask you to solve it with the quadratic formula and with completing the square. What should happen? You should get the same answer, but the work is going to look very different depending on the strategy. So again, you can write this down or not write it down. I'm going to complete the square on this, just to refresh your memory. So does anybody remember what we do first to complete the square?
Add 4 to the other side and leave a hole.
Exactly. Add 4 to the other side and leave a hole. And actually the hole has to be on the other side too. Divide this number by 2 and square it. So 10 divided by 2 squared. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. Whoops, 25 to both sides. Now, this is where we make mistakes sometimes. The very next step is to go to the square. So what quantity squared is x squared plus 10x plus 25?
X plus 5.
X plus 5, that's exactly right. Remember I told, obviously it's x, obviously it's 5, and this sign always matches. Okay? And then over here, of course, you got 29. Now, here it's easy. I think everybody will get it right if you can get this far. Now we simply square root both sides. So x plus 5 equals plus or minus root 29. And then that's actually 2 equations. X plus 5 equals positive root 29, and x plus 5 equals negative root 29. So you can write it as 2 separate answers. Or this kind you can actually write together if you choose. So either those 2 separately or this together would be the answer. So kind of remember talking about that a little bit the other day. So now we're going to solve the same kind of equation, x squared plus 8x minus 9, but we're going to use the quadratic formula. Math is a beautiful thing. Could I complete the square on that equation?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Could I factor that equation? Yeah. But, so we got options. We're going to do the quadratic formula. Now, before I start in on the problem, maybe I better write the formula down. Does anybody remember the formula? X
Plus or minus b.
Plus.
Oh, yeah, you're
No,
right.
x equals
Oh, b.
negative b.
Plus or minus. Square root. B squared minus 4ac.
Divided by 2.
2a. Yep, all over 2a. So write that down on your paper if you don't quite have it totally memorized yet. Write that down on your paper. That's called the quadratic formula. Now, what are the A, B, and C in the formula? The formula is full of A's, B's, and C's. Where do those come from?
Like the order of the numbers.
Those are the coefficients. Good. So in this problem, A is 1, B is 8, and C is the plain number, which is negative 9. Remember, when you're writing down your A, B, and C, the negatives come with it. Now it's just a matter of plugging and chugging, right? So here we go, x equals negative b plus or minus, there's that plus or minus, see? That plus or minus. B squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. You wanna write this down, Brandon?
Oh, I'm good. Oh, wait, that wasn't the question.
Yeah, these are the notes. Yeah, we might want to write that down. So what do you think? Ready? Let's work on this part in here. Anybody know what this part's called? It's got a name. It's called the discriminant.
Yeah.
Let me write it. It's called the discriminant. So b squared minus 4ac, that quantity right there is the discriminant. So what is our discriminant? We have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of what? What does all that work out to be? 100. And it's 100 because you have a negative times a negative, so that makes a positive 36. 64 and 36 is 100. Well, that's a nice number to have under the square root. Negative 8 plus or minus 10. So just like before, now we're going to get two different answers, guys. We have x equals negative 8 plus 10 over 2. And x equals negative 8 minus 10 over 2. Negative 8 plus 10 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. Negative 8 minus 10 is negative 18, divided by 2 is negative 9. I hope somebody didn't say negative 6. I thought I heard a negative 6. That would not be good. Negative 9. So those are our answers. All right? That's pretty easy, right?
You just leave it like that?
You leave it like x equals 1 and negative 9. That's how you leave it. Those are the answers. When you're solving an equation, x equals is the way you want your answer. All right, let's try one more. We probably don't have to practice a bunch of these, but let's try another one. Maybe get you up here to do one. By the way, when your answers turn out like this, nice, neat numbers, it means your equation is factorable. When the answers turn out like this with the root 29s, that means your equation wasn't factorable. All right, here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember, your denominator is 2a. It's not always just 2. It's 2 times a. All right, the hardest part's that discriminant. What is going on there? What is that? What? Close.
37.
We got 25, and then we're going to have a plus, right? Because we have minus times minus. Remember, that's multiply.
Plus 24.
So that's a 24. What's 25 plus 24? 49. So you were close. And that's another nice one to have. So it's negative 5 plus or minus 7.
Yeah, very close.
So negative 5 plus 7 would be 2 divided by 4, or 1/2.
Yep.
Negative 5 minus 7, negative 12 over 4, which is negative 3. So my answers are 1/2 and negative 3. So that I factored. I could have factored that. If I don't have a radical in my answer, it means it factored. Let's do one more. This one doesn't factor and something strange is going to happen. Let's see if you can figure out what's going to happen that's a little bit different. Maybe you already know. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Can anybody see something different that's going to happen this time, Pat?
The number inside the discriminant is going to be negative.
The discriminant's going to be a negative number. Oh my, that's an issue.
No, it's not.
Back in the old days, we put no solution, but we're grown-ups now. So what did you learn last year about the square roots of negatives? We're going to have an I. We're going to have an I in this. Let's get there. So negative 3 plus or minus the square root of. This is a subtraction problem now. So it's 9 minus, because there's no other negative. So it's 9 minus 56.
Yep.
Which would be negative 47. And whenever we have the square root of a negative, you pull out the I. So negative 3 plus or minus I root 47. And if the 47 breaks down, you break it down just like you always do, but it doesn't. So that's it. Normally, the I is going to be out in front of the radical. Normally, like if we had, let's say I root 12. Normally, we write that 2I root 3. We normally put the I in between the number and the radical. But if you did this, if you did I 2 root 3, that is not wrong. What we really don't want to do is say 2 root 3I. Do you know why? Because it's kind of confusing if that's underneath. And you might say, well, Miss Ford, you can't have an I under a radical. Yes, you can. That's chapter 6 for us, right? So we really don't want to write it that way. As long as the I is out in front of the radical, it really doesn't matter where it is. This is a normal. This would be how a math teacher would write it. All right, you okay with that? Not just okay, you're excited, because that's easy, right? We got that. We got that. All right, try D on your own. Try D on your own. Looks like it might have an I in it. Oh, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have an I in it. Good news. In this, you get here. You got Sam? Nope, you can't take it down any further because 13 is a prime number, right?
So you just leave it like that?
Now that is 2 separate answers, so if you wanted to pull them apart and write them separately, you could, but why? Right? Gabriella, where's our head down? Are we sick? You're tired? Honey child, I had to have my daughter at the airport this morning at 5 a.m. that meant I had to leave my house at 4:15, which means I had to get up at 3:30, about 10:30. Yeah, see these bags? I got a reason for these. All right, turn the page. Here we go. You see nothing but youthful radiance. That's right. Here we go. I actually got to go skiing yesterday. I love to ski. I don't get to go very often because I don't have a boat, so that's a little problematic. But Mrs. Mills, science teacher, has a boat, so they needed a third yesterday to go out in the morning, so I went with them. It was wonderful. But the reason I'm telling you this is I might have more than bags under here because the water was very, very nice. Usually when I go out, it's like too rough and I'm too old and it's just terrible. But it was really nice yesterday morning. And so I was taking some chances that I used to be a competitive water skier. So I like to ski a lot, but I'm 60 and I don't do it very often. But I was taking some chances yesterday and had a very nice little wipeout. And my reflexes aren't as good as they used to be, so instead of shutting my eyes, they were wide open when I plowed face first into the water, and it peeled my eyelid all the way back. When I popped out of the water, first thing I did was feel to make sure I still had an eye, because I thought for sure it had then I thought I might be black and blue or swollen or something, but I'm not.
You can get bye-bye under eye.
I made
Bye-bye under eye.
That's what I mean.
I
All
use
right,
it.
here we go.
It doesn't help.
It doesn't help. We're on the back of page 5. We're on the back of page 5. We are solving these equations. Now, this looks different than this. Something here might turn out to be a quadratic, but we need a different strategy for this. What's going to be our strategy for solving this equation, Mr. Burker?
Square root both sides.
Square both sides, yeah. That's
Oh, no,
exactly
square
what we want to do, yeah.
Square.
We want to square both sides. And since both sides are under a radical, they're just going to cancel out, and we're just going to have a simple little equation to solve. Right? That's it. Yay! We know how to solve that. So negative 2x equals negative 3. I got 3/2.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that what you got?
no.
Now you're going to hate me,
Oh, yes.
but it's not quite this easy. Because when you do this process, squaring both sides, that introduces the possibility of extraneous roots. Now, have you heard that word before?
No.
Some of you say yes, some of you say no. An extraneous root is an answer that you get. You haven't made any mistakes. It just doesn't check. It's kind of like an anomaly. You didn't make any mistakes. You did everything right, but it just doesn't work. Those are called extraneous roots. They happen in different kinds of problems, but the main kind of problem they happen in is when you square both sides. So, what we have to do every time we square both sides is we have to check our answers. Okay? So, if I check my answer, I'm going to plug in 3/2 right here. Now, I'm going back to the original problem. Don't panic. It's going to be easy. All you have to do is show that they match. We don't even care what they are as long as they match. So if I put in 1/2, wouldn't this be the square root of 3/2? Isn't this 1/2? And 1/2 plus 2 is 3/2. All right, what happens over here? This is 3 times 1/2, which is 4.5, minus 1, 3.5. I don't care what the square root of 3.5 is. I just care that that's what I got on both sides. So that means this is my answer. Now, A lot of times kids say, Miss Ford, that's too confusing, I don't want to check. Bailey. Yoo-hoo.
Oh, gosh.
Oh gosh, is right. If you don't check, then you're going to miss points if it happens to be an extraneous root. If you don't check, that's fine, but you'll never know if you have a real root or not. So I would advise that you check when you square both sides of an equation. All right, let's look at the next one. The next one's a little bit different. But you're going to solve it exactly the same way. You're going to square both sides. Now, when we square both sides, what happens to the 2? It becomes a 4. And this becomes x plus 1? And that becomes 9? So when I say we're going to square both sides, we square everything. So this gets squared, that gets squared, that gets squared. So 4x plus 4 equals 9. 4x equals 5, and x equals 5/4.
Now it's time to check.
Now it's time to check. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to write down what I've got since it's a little more complicated. So 5/4 plus 1. All right, so this is supposed to work out to be 3. If this is a good answer, when I put 5/4 in there, that's going to work out to be 3. I'm going to leave this one as a fraction, and you'll see why. If I don't have a calculator, it's probably easier. What's 5/4 plus 1? 9/4. Very good. For those of you that are wondering about that, think. 5/4 plus 1. Don't we need a common denominator?
Yeah.
So that would be 5/4 plus 4/4. What's the square root of 9/4? 3 halves. And what happens when we multiply 2 over 1 times 3 over 2?
It turns into 3.
It turns into 3. So once again, we have a good answer. Then if it's a bad answer,
No solution.
if that hadn't checked, then the answer would be no solution. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Now, this is one that catches people if they're not thinking, like maybe they're a little drowsy or something. This can catch you. You're going to square both sides. But notice, I square the whole side, which means this side is going to be a FOIL problem. It's the quantity x plus 1. When we say square both sides, we mean you square the side. Here's the side, I'm going to square that whole thing. So this is going to be x plus 1 times x plus 1, which is a FOIL, x squared plus x plus x plus 1. Remember, you know what I'm talking about when I say FOIL, first outside, inside, last, how we multiply binomials. That's a quadratic equation, you guys. That's an x squared equation. So I'm going to move everything over and collect some like terms. So I'm going to have 0 over here. I got an x squared. How many x's do I have?
3.
Well, I have 1 and 1, and then I'm going to add another one over. So 3 x's. What am I going to do with this 5?
Minus 4.
Subtract it, so minus 4. Now, your job is to solve that. So you got a bunch of methods. You could complete the square, You could use the quadratic formula that we just talked about, or if it factors, feel free to do that.
Where does 0 come from?
Added the x to
Oh,
both
just moved
sides
it over.
and subtracted the 5.
Got it.
I think it does factor, but again, I don't want to steer you down any road. I don't care how you do it. If you're good with the quadratic formula, if that's your favorite way, then do it that way. This one does factor. So we get 2 answers, don't we? Guess what we get to do with 2 answers? Check them both. Check them both.
I'm still
Go ahead, what? Where are you?
behind.
Who said that? Which one was that? Is it? It's okay. It's all right. Where are you at here? Are
Well, I
you?
did the quadratic formula.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if you did the quadratic formula,
Because it's the only way to get the right answer.
you should have -3 plus or minus the square root of 25.
Yeah.
So -3 plus or minus 5.
Okay, I got it now.
-3 plus 5 is 2 over 2 is 1. And -3 minus 5 is -8 over 2, which is -4. So
Now
you,
check.
everybody gets the same answers. Yeah, so now we're going to check it. So we're going to plug. Here's my original problem. You always go back to the original, right back to the original, written on the paper. So here we go. I'm going to plug in -4. So 5 minus -4 equals -4 plus 1. So every time I saw an x, I put in -4. I'm checking that answer. I have to check both of them one at a time. So what's 5 minus -4? 9. Square root of 9 is 3. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Did it not work?
That's an extraneous, so I crossed that one off. Now don't say no solution, because I still have one more to check. If it doesn't work, then it will be no solution, but I have to check it first. So the square root of 5 minus 1 equals 1 plus 1. I'm putting ones in now. 5 minus 1 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2 equals 2. That one works. So in the answer blank would go just the number 1. The -4 was extraneous. Try that last one. You would, there's one more. Would you try that?
What number?
It's D.
Or D?
5D. Yep. Try 5D. Is anybody confused about how to start? There is something we probably want to do before we get started here.
Subtract 5.
Subtract the 5. Good idea.
Okay,
If you wanted to make it easier on yourself, do you think you could divide both sides by 2?
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, but you might. It's a little easier. So, did you square both sides and get x equals 4?
Yeah.
Everybody with me? You got what? Did I make a mistake?
Yeah, where'd the 1 come from?
I divided both sides by 2. So I got -1, and then when I squared it, I got 1, and I squared both sides here.
Where's the 5?
The first thing we did was subtract 5. That we've got to do
Yeah,
that.
that
You've
becomes
got to
that.
subtract that 5.
So if we did divide by 2 at first,
That
If
makes
you
that's
get it divided, you square and get 4 times x minus 3 equals 4, right? So 4x minus 12 equals 4.
I mean, either way though.
4x equals 16 and x equals 4. You get the same answer.
Yeah, but either way, I don't think
All right, so Brendan's up here saying, I'm not sure that works. I think you might have an extraneous root. So here's our original problem, and that's where we go to. Always go to the original. If you put 4 in here, that's the answer we got. If you put 4 in, you get the square root of 1, which is 1, times 2 is 2, plus 5 is not 3. So this one has no solutions.
So did we do it wrong?
No, we didn't. That's the thing about extraneous roots. We made no mistakes. We did the math absolutely perfectly. It's the procedure that causes this to happen. When you square both sides, like we did right here when we squared both sides, anything that was negative is automatically going to become positive. So that throws off all the signs in the problem. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes that's not okay. And so this was an example where we needed that sign and we lost it.
Wait, I have a question. Why did we put? Never mind. I got it.
Okay, good.
So, Sport, can you talk about how you competitively water ski? How did you, what?
They're tournaments. Just like there's tournaments for softball and stuff, there's tournaments for water skiing. And there's different events like
Right.
jumping, tricking.
But you did that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Okay. All right, now, I have a sheet I want to hand out to you.
Is it a homework sheet?
This is if you have been paying attention to your homework. Yeah, so the answer to the problem we just did is empty set. There is no answer. Because the only answer we got didn't show. So that means there are no answers. Those of you that have been doing homework know that in P5 it said extra problem worksheet or something. Here it is. Now,
Yeah, because that's what
I wonder if I have a locker.
You do have a locker.
How do I know?
The power tool.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Miss Ford, do you want me to stop the iPad?
yeah, all of it. It's just the front